When I close my eyes, that red dirt road still appears vividly before me, as if 70 years weren't enough to blur the memory. The old flamboyant trees stand motionless under the summer sun, like silent sentinels guarding the childhood I left behind. Now, with wrinkled hands and slow steps, I return to the past each time the sun sets, when the line between the present and the past grows as thin as morning mist drifting over the fields of my homeland. People often say that old age is like a boat returning to its old dock. Perhaps it's true. I, Nguyen Thi Mai, am now 85 years old. Yet my heart still stirs whenever I think of that small village by the Perfume River. The place where the secrets of my life lie buried, like grains of rice hidden deep beneath the spring soil, waiting for the day they sprout and reach for the light. I have never told anyone about that rainy night, the fateful night when I was just 16, when I lost everything but also found myself. A secret I have kept for 7 decades, like a wound that never truly heals. But now, as the twilight of my life draws near, perhaps it is time for me to open my heart, before everything turns to dust. When I turned 17, life took me down an unexpected path. My mother, afraid I might get involved with a boy too young. Back then, parents were strict with their children about not dating before marriage, sent me to the Sacred Heart convent, which, although in the same town of Prescott, felt worlds away from the freedom of my home life. The convent seemed to promise a new beginning, but I quickly realized the reality was quite different. The haircut, the uniform, the rules, everything seemed to suffocate me. And the longing for home, for the smell of cornbread, for my mother, for the sound of conversations in the streets, gave me a deep sense of pain. But despite everything, I never lost hope. I knew life could be better, that I had the strength to fight for it. And it was in that struggle that I found my path. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The day was hot like all others in Prescott, and the sky seemed more distant than ever. I was at home, sitting on the porch with my mother beside me. She had that serene smile, but her eyes seemed to hide something. I didn't know yet, but something big was about to happen. Mom looked at me and spoke with a calm voice full of affection. "Elaine, my daughter, the time has come. You're going to the convent. There you'll learn many good things." I felt a chill in my stomach. The convent? I never imagined my life would change so quickly. I, who spent my days dreaming of what lay beyond the hills of Prescott, would now be taken to a place that seemed like an enormous silence, where the freedom I so loved would be left behind. I wanted to ask so many things, but the words wouldn't come out. How could it be the convent? How could my life change this way? What would become of that blue sky I loved so much, of the cheerful conversations with my mother on the porch? "Don't worry, my daughter," she said, noticing my look. "It will be a good opportunity for you to grow. There you'll study and learn everything you need." But deep down I felt something different. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in my town with my mother, in the place where everything made sense to me. At the convent, I knew I would have to follow rules, that I could no longer run through the fields and look at the sky freely. What awaited me there seemed very distant from what I desired. And yet my mother was right. I had no choice. The next day I was already packed for the journey. My suitcase was full of new clothes, but my heart was empty. I looked at the sky one more time, trying to engrave that moment in my memory. The sun was shining, but everything seemed different. The sky seemed farther away than ever. I said goodbye to Prescott, to my mother, to my life, and began a journey I never imagined I would have to make. The convent was waiting for me, and I was going to a place where everything would be different, where I would have to learn to be another person. But deep down, something inside me said that this journey would be just the beginning of something much greater. I didn't know what it was yet, but I was going to find out. The journey to the convent was long and tiring. When we finally arrived, it seemed that the world outside had been left behind. The convent was large, with high walls and heavy doors, as if it wanted to swallow me. I looked around and only saw tall trees and cold walls. The sky seemed even more distant. I was received by nuns, who looked me up and down without a smile on their faces. They wore dark clothes, and their voices were low and serious. I felt as if I were in a place where no one smiled, where joy didn't exist. Everything was too silent, as if each step I took was wrong. "Welcome to Sacred Heart Convent, Elaine," one of the nuns said with a voice that had no emotion. "Now here you will learn to be a good, obedient, and respectful girl. There is no place for mischief here." I didn't know what to do. I wanted to go back home, to my mother, to the warmth of Prescott. But instead, I was there in a place where everything seemed so different, so dark and silent. I felt like a flower without sun, not knowing what to do to grow again. In the first days, everything seemed very difficult. I had to follow rules I never imagined existed. The nuns woke us up early, made us work and study in silence all the time. And worst of all, I could no longer run through the fields, could no longer look at the sky and dream as before. My freedom was being taken from me, and I felt increasingly lost. But it was in this place that I met Hazel. She was older than me, and had a curious look, as if she knew that there, in that gloomy place, there was something more waiting for us. Hazel didn't seem to care about the rules as much as the other girls. She spoke softly, but always with a sparkle in her eyes, as if she knew something needed to change. "Don't be like this, Elaine," she told me one night. "It's hard in here, but we'll find a way to be free even in small things. Don't let this place imprison you inside." Hazel gave me a hope I didn't know existed in that place. She told me about her own dreams, about what she did when she was younger, and how she didn't let herself be erased by the convent's rules. She taught me that despite everything, there was still a way to resist, to keep our dreams alive, even if no one else saw them. I began to realize that even in the shadows, I could still find a path to freedom. Hazel became my friend, my confidant, and it was she who showed me that despite all the difficulties, I could still be myself. Even when everything around seemed to make us disappear, we two discovered that hope doesn't fade away. It's found in the details, in small gestures of silent rebellion. The days passed slowly in the convent, as if time didn't want to let me leave. I woke up early, did the chores non-stop, and at night lay down with my head full of questions. What would the world be like outside those walls? How could I feel the freedom of before again? I didn't know, but one thing I knew well. I couldn't stop dreaming. It was on a dark night that Hazel looked at me with a different sparkle in her eyes. I was tired, lying in my bed thinking about life outside, when she approached almost in silence. Her steps were light, but her gaze said everything. She seemed to have something very important to tell me. "Elaine, I found a way out," said Hazel with a mysterious smile. I sat up in bed, eyes wide, waiting for what she had to say. Could she be serious? Was there really a way to get out of that place? Everything here is designed to keep us in, but if you look carefully, there's always a gap, a small opening. I've studied everything here well. I know how we can get out. Are you willing to try? I didn't know what to think. My heart was racing, but at the same time, something inside me told me that if there was a chance to escape, I needed to grab it with all my strength. I couldn't spend my entire life in that silent prison. Yes, Hazel, I'm in. I want to see the world again. I want to feel the wind on my face, look at the sky, and dream. Let's do this. Hazel hugged me tightly, as if she knew that moment was the beginning of something very important. She explained that during the nights when everyone was asleep, she had discovered a secret path, a hidden passage that would lead us outside the convent. It was a risky path, but to me, any risk would be worth it if it meant the chance to be free. That night was different. There was no sleep, no dreams. There were only plans. Hazel taught me how to be silent, how to walk without making noise, how to avoid the nuns who patrolled the convent at night. I never thought that a simple act of walking could be so important. But there, each step, each movement, could be the difference between freedom and imprisonment. When the time came, Hazel and I got up silently. I felt my heart beating strongly, but at the same time, a sense of courage took over me. I knew that if we didn't try, we would never know what we could achieve. With trembling hands but a focused mind, we followed dark and silent corridors. The convent seemed like a different place at that hour of the night. All I could hear was the sound of our steps and my heart beating faster with each minute. Finally, we reached the wall where Hazel had found the gap. I looked at her and saw the confidence in her eyes. Without words, we began to climb very carefully, without making noise. The sensation of being outside those walls, feeling the cold wind on my face, was the most wonderful thing I had ever experienced. It seemed that for a moment, the whole world opened up before us. I felt that finally, I had a chance to realize my dreams, to be free again. Hazel and I hugged without saying anything. We knew that despite the fear and uncertainty, our friendship and our courage would lead us to a new beginning. The feeling of freedom was wonderful, but it didn't last long. When Hazel and I went over the convent wall, the air outside seemed so fresh and free. We felt we were finally in a place where we could breathe, where we could dream again. But before I could realize it, something happened. Something very bad. The next day, as we returned to the convent without knowing what to expect, we found her, Mother Superior Regina, Everyone talked about her. She was the most severe nun of all. She always walked around the convent with such a hard look that it seemed she could see everything you were thinking. She was like a shadow, and when she entered a place, the atmosphere became heavy. Mother Superior Regina saw us as soon as we arrived. She was standing in the corridor with her arms crossed, waiting. Her gaze was so cold, as if she had read all our thoughts and knew exactly what we had done. Fear grew inside me, and I felt my heart beat faster. "So you two think you can escape, is that it?" she asked. Her voice was firm, as if it were an order, not a question. Not, "You think you can leave and come back without anyone noticing? Here at the convent, you can never escape." Hazel was quiet as always. She knew that if she tried to speak, it could make everything worse. I, on the other hand, felt I needed to say something. I wanted to explain, wanted to apologize, but fear paralyzed me. Mother Superior Regina took a step forward and looked at us with eyes so hard that it seemed she could swallow us. "Here you are, mine, and no one will escape the rules," she said, with a very strange smile that didn't seem genuine. It was the smile of someone who was enjoying our pain. Those who disobey need to learn a lesson. Hazel, still with a calm voice, tried to speak. "Mother, we just wanted to be free. We just wanted to see the world outside. Feel life." Mother Superior Regina gave a low laugh, almost mocking Hazel. "Free," she repeated as if it were a joke. "Here you have no freedom. Here there is only obedience, and those who don't obey learn the hard way." I didn't know what to do. That look of hers made me feel so small, as if there was nothing more I could do. "Mother Superior." Regina turned and said firmly, "Come with me. We're going to talk about what you did." I looked at Hazel and could see that she was also afraid, but didn't want to show it. We had no choice. We had to go with her, without knowing what would happen to us. The fear was inside us, but there was nothing we could do to change that situation. Mother Superior Regina, with her firm step and commanding voice, led us to a place I had never seen before. And at that moment, I knew we would have to be very strong to face what was to come. That day was etched in my memory, forever. Mother Superior Regina took us to a dark room where we had never been before. The place was cold and empty, with only a weak candle illuminating the walls. She made us stand there without saying a word, just observing us with her sharp eyes. The silence was heavy, and my heart was beating hard. Hazel, beside me, was calmer, but I could feel tension in the air. I knew the Mother Superior wouldn't do anything without reason. She was waiting for the right moment to speak. "You think you can leave and return whenever you want, don't you?" she began, her voice cold and relentless. "Well, now you'll learn what happens when you disobey." She paused as if savoring that moment. I felt fear, but something inside me also felt anger. Anger at being treated that way, as if our lives were worth nothing. "You'll spend the night here without food, without water, and you'll have to think carefully about what you did," said Mother Superior Regina with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "If you can't learn the lesson, you'll have to face something worse. Next time. Hazel and I exchanged a look, not knowing what to do. Fear took hold of us, but at the same time, we knew that the only way to move forward was to endure. We couldn't show weakness. We couldn't let her know how scared we were. The hours passed slowly, and the cold of the room seemed to enter my skin. I tried not to think about hunger or thirst, but it was difficult. Time didn't pass, and each second seemed longer than the previous one. I looked at Hazel, but she said nothing. She was as quiet as I was, perhaps thinking the same way. Would we be able to get out of here? That's when Mother Superior Regina entered again, and her look now seemed even more threatening. I see you've learned well what obedience means, but this was just the first lesson. If you ever think of running away again, you'll have to face more severe consequences. Now you can go to your rooms, but remember, next time won't be so easy. The two of us, tired and with aching bodies, were taken back to our beds. We didn't speak a word on the way back. The fear was still there, but there was also something else. A growing strength inside me. I didn't know how long we would endure it, but I knew that if we could get through this, it would be just one more battle won. And deep in my heart, I knew that despite everything, hope had not yet faded away. We too were stronger than before, more determined than ever to fight for our freedom. The convent was in ruins. The cracked walls and the roof that could no longer bear the weight of time needed urgent repair. Mother Superior Regina, with her look of someone who always has everything under control, organized a renovation of the place. She hired 3 men to repair the damage, and the Mother Superior authorized them to spend the night there to speed up the work. It was the first time the convent received men working in its facilities, and this made everyone a bit uncomfortable, especially the nuns who were always accustomed to calm and order. The following days were difficult. The convent was full of noise, hammers hitting, wood being cut, and the constant sound of work. But worst of all was the tension in the air. The nuns seemed more nervous, and even the walls seemed gloomier, as if the building itself was feeling the change. Night fell silently on the convent, as it always did. But that night there was something strange in the air. The wind beat against the windows with more force, and the sound of the footsteps of the men who worked on the renovation still echoed through the corridors, even after everyone was already in their rooms. I was lying with the blanket up to my neck, trying to sleep. Hazel wasn't there at that hour, and the room seemed even emptier. That's when the door creaked very slowly, and my heart raced. One of the men who worked on the renovation came in. I didn't know what he wanted or why he was there. My body froze. He didn't say anything, just entered and approached quickly. I was so startled I could barely breathe. When I tried to get up, he grabbed me by the arm forcefully, turning me around without saying a word, with that brute force. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I froze at that moment. The fear was so great that the only thing I could do was stay still. I thought, if I scream, they'll think I did something wrong. They'll think badly of me. And the Mother Superior would never believe me. She would think I was enjoying what that man was doing to me. He then released me after having abused me as if nothing had happened, and left the room the same way he entered, in silence, with firm steps as if it were normal. That wretch had brutally abused me, and I was left there traumatized, not knowing what to do. When the door closed, I stayed there. The room was dark, and I felt small, with my heart racing, my body trembling, and tears flowing nonstop. I cried softly, hiding my face in the pillow, afraid someone would hear, afraid of myself. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I would never be the same. Something inside me had changed, and in that silence, I promised that I wouldn't let this break me. Even hurt inside, I still believed that one day, all this would end, and that I would leave that place stronger, even if marked. Besides the convent having its flaws, I had also been abused there in that place by that wretch. The next day arrived with a gray sky and a fine rain falling on the convent. The silence of the night was still in my mind, and the fear I felt upon waking didn't seem to disappear. I was tired, but not from sleep. I was tired of feeling weak and powerless. I knew I needed to tell someone about what happened, but a part of me feared being ignored, or, worse, being blamed for something I didn't do. I decided to go to Mother Superior Regina. She was the leader of the convent, and I hoped that by telling her what had happened, she would help me find a solution. But at the same time, fear paralyzed me. What if she didn't believe me? What if she looked at me with suspicion, as if I were to blame for everything? When I entered Mother Superior Regina's office, she was sitting behind her desk with a serious face and sharp eyes. The environment was cold, and the light from the window barely illuminated the room. I sat in front of her and remained silent for a few seconds, trying to find the right words. "Mother, I need to talk to you about something." My voice came out trembling, as if I were trying to convince myself that I would be strong enough to tell. She looked at me with an attentive, but also distant look, as if she were already tired of hearing complaints. "What happened, Elaine? Is everything all right with you?" she asked in a cold tone. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart tight in my chest. I knew it would be difficult to speak, but I also knew I needed to tell the truth. "Mother, I need to tell you about what one of the renovation workers did to me last night. He forced himself on me." The silence in the room seemed to last an eternity. I looked at Mother Superior Regina, trying to read her expression, waiting for some reaction. But what she did was something I never imagined. She didn't stand up, didn't show concern, nothing. She just looked at me with an impassive expression and spoke with a firm voice, almost as if she were reprimanding me. "This is a very serious accusation, Elaine. But you need to understand that here at the convent, we have rules. Things have to be done the right way, and without evidence, nothing can be done. These men were authorized to work here, and any problem must be dealt with more carefully. I cannot take actions without more details." I felt shock taking over me. She didn't believe me. There was no empathy, no compassion. I tried to explain once more with a trembling voice, but she interrupted me. "Elaine, the convent is a place of order and discipline. If you have nothing more to say about this, then let's end this conversation." I stood up, feeling humiliation and frustration take over me. The feeling of being ignored, of not being heard, of having no one to support me made me feel even more alone. I had the courage to speak, but now I was more lost than ever. As I left the Mother Superior's room, the weight of what had happened hit me hard. I knew the Mother Superior didn't believe me, and the fear of not being able to count on anyone made me feel more fragile. But deep down, something inside me ignited. If I couldn't count on her, I would need to find a way to face this alone. I knew that my fight for freedom wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't willing to be silent. I needed to be stronger. With a heavy heart, I left Mother Superior's office and sought out the one person who might understand. Hazel. I tried to control the tears, but they began to run down my face without me being able to stop them. The air inside the convent seemed denser, colder. I didn't know where else to seek help if even the Mother Superior didn't believe me. When I reached my room, Hazel was there. She was sitting on the bed with attentive eyes, as if she already knew something was wrong. She got up quickly upon seeing me, and before I could say anything, she approached. "Elaine, what happened?" she asked with a soft voice but full of concern. I couldn't hold it anymore. The weight of everything I had gone through that morning crashed down on me, and I cried like I had never cried before. The tears wouldn't stop falling, and sobbing took over me. Hazel hugged me tightly without saying anything, just offering the silent support I so needed. I clung to her as if she were the only thing I had left. After a few minutes, I tried to speak, my voice still trembling. "Hazel, I tried to talk to the Mother Superior. I told her what happened, but she doesn't believe me. She ignored me as if nothing had happened. She said I had no proof and that she couldn't do anything." Hazel looked at me with a look of anger and sadness, but didn't say anything. She knew it wasn't fair. She knew that even without proof, my pain was real and deserved to be heard. "Elaine, you are not alone. I am with you. I always will be," she said firmly. "No matter what the Mother Superior says, I believe you. We are not alone here." I took a deep breath, feeling the relief of hearing her words. With Hazel by my side, I felt I could face anything. Even if the Mother Superior didn't believe me, at least one person understood me. This gave me strength to move forward. Time passed, and the following months were difficult. The renovation at the convent continued, and the men's work never seemed to end. But I focused on what really mattered: my friendship with Hazel and my own inner strength. I knew I couldn't stand still, that I needed to keep my hope alive, even when everything around me seemed to push me down. Hazel and I spent more time together, and each moment of conversation and support was crucial for my sanity. She helped me keep my head high, even when everything seemed gloomy. Sometimes we felt there was no way out, but we never stopped believing that at some point, things would get better. The fight for my freedom, for truth, and for my right to be heard wasn't over. I knew the journey would be long and difficult, but with Hazel by my side, I had the courage to face whatever came. The days seemed like a blur. The convent, with its endless routine, no longer seemed like the safe place I once believed it to be. The work, the prayers, the forced silences, everything was beginning to mix into a grey fog that I could barely get through. The symptoms I had been feeling since the day of the man's visit, the feeling of nausea, the constant fatigue, were intensifying. I tried to ignore them, but my body was telling me something was happening, and I could no longer postpone the truth. What started as a slight feeling of discomfort was turning into something more tangible. That morning, the malaise was even stronger. I couldn't get out of bed immediately, and when I finally dragged myself to the bathroom, the pain in my stomach seemed unbearable. The feeling of fatigue was so great that my body seemed too heavy to move. It was, at that moment, in front of the mirror in a small and simple bathroom of the convent, that the truth finally hit me. I knew I could no longer run from it. Something inside me had already changed. I was pregnant. For days after this realization, I wandered through the convent like a ghost, my mind racing with impossible choices. I thought of my mother, who had sent me here to protect me from exactly this situation. I thought of the child growing inside me, innocent and unaware of the circumstances of its creation. Most of all, I thought about what kind of future awaited us both in a world that would judge us harshly. These thoughts consumed me until I could barely eat or sleep, and it became clear I couldn't face this alone. Fear took over me. I leaned against the sink and looked at my image in the mirror. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew the truth was there, visible and impossible to ignore. What did this mean for me? What would it mean for the future? How would this affect my life at the convent? I no longer knew where to run, but I felt the pressure of the weight of the discovery. The tears began to fall silently, and the only thing I could think of was the emptiness that now filled my chest. How could I be in this situation? How? A young woman who just dreamed of freedom and a better future could be facing this alone in a place that should be of protection. The pain of not being able to tell anyone, of having to carry this secret, was almost unbearable. I knew I needed to talk to someone. Hazel. I needed her more than ever. She had always been by my side, but now, with this weight in my heart, I felt I couldn't face it alone. I left the bathroom still with the feeling of floating, and found Hazel in the corridor. She looked at me with attentive eyes, as if she already knew something wasn't right. "Elaine, what happened?" she asked softly, noticing my lost look. I couldn't hide any more. The words came out almost in a whisper, trembling. "Hazel, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us, and Hazel's expression changed instantly. She came to me, taking my hand gently, and led me to a corner of the convent, away from curious eyes. She knew the conversation we would have couldn't be heard by anyone. The convent was becoming increasingly difficult for me. My belly, which was already beginning to grow, reminded me all the time of what was happening. But I still didn't know how to deal with it. Fear and confusion consumed me, and I knew I could no longer hide what was happening to my body. I needed to talk to Mother Superior Regina. When I entered her office, the room was silent. The Mother Superior was there, seated as always with her serious look. I swallowed hard and, with a stuttering voice, said, "Mother, I need to tell you something important. I am pregnant." She looked at me in silence for a while, as if thinking about what I had just said. Then she got up and came to me with a cold look. "Pregnant?" she repeated without surprise but with a tone of disapproval. "This is serious, Elaine. You know that, don't you?" I felt small, as if I were being judged for something I didn't even know how it had happened. I tried to explain, but the Mother Superior didn't let me speak for long. "You have to make a decision now," she said firmly. "You need to terminate this pregnancy, Elaine. We cannot let this continue here. The convent cannot accept this." I felt a chill in my stomach. I didn't know what to do. But one thing I knew. I couldn't do what the Mother Superior was asking. I looked at her with a trembling voice and said, "No, Mother. I cannot do that. I don't want to do that." She looked at me with a severe look, as if trying to make me understand what she thought was best for me. "If you refuse, then there is no more place for you here," she said with a rigid tone. After being expelled from the convent, I found temporary shelter with a sympathetic nun until I could contact my Aunt Vivian. At that moment, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. The convent that once was my refuge now rejected me, but at the same time, I knew that somehow I was being freed. I no longer needed to live with the fear and pain of being trapped there without being heard, without having my own right to choose what to do. I left the Mother Superior's room without saying anything more. When the door closed behind me, a feeling of relief took over me. I was being expelled, yes, but at the same time, I was finally free from something that imprisoned me. I didn't know what would come next, but something inside me said I could face whatever came. I now had the freedom to make my own choices, to fight for what I believed in. And with that, a new chapter of my life was about to begin. After being expelled from the convent, a whirlwind of thoughts took over me. The feeling of freedom was mixed with the fear of what would come next. I didn't want to return to my mother's house. I knew she wouldn't understand. The disapproving look of the Mother Superior was still in my mind, and I felt alone, lost, not knowing where to go. That's when I decided to go to my Aunt Vivian's house. She lived in a small town far from the convent, and had always been like a second mother to me. When I arrived at her house, I didn't say anything at first. I'd just found her in the kitchen, and she looked at me with an expression of concern when she saw me. "Elaine, what happened?" she asked as she hugged me. Her affection made me feel that there was still a bit of hope in the world. It was all I needed at that moment. I then explained everything, from the expulsion from the convent to the discovery of the pregnancy. I talked about the fear, the rejection, the pain I was feeling, and the decision the Mother Superior had made, wanting me to terminate my pregnancy. Aunt Vivian listened to me patiently without interrupting, and her look was one of total understanding. When I finished speaking, she looked at me with tenderness. "I understand, Elaine. I understand your suffering, how difficult all this has been for you. But my dear, you are not alone. You have me, and I will be here to help you, regardless of what happened in the past. You did what you could, and now it's time to find a path for you and for this baby." Those words gave me some relief, and I knew I could count on her. During the 9 months that followed, Aunt Vivian supported me in every way she could. She encouraged me to think about what would be best for me and for the baby. At first, I was full of doubts. not knowing what to do with that new life growing inside me. But with time, the doubt and pain began to transform into a decision. I knew I couldn't raise a child in such a difficult environment, with so many emotional wounds still open. I wasn't prepared to be a mother, not the way he deserved. I wanted him to have a better future, and for that, I knew I needed to be brave. That's when Aunt Vivian suggested, with great delicacy, that I consider adoption. She told me she could help find a family that would love and care for my son. Someone who could give him what I couldn't at that moment. Adoption, Elaine. It's a difficult decision, but it's an act of love and courage. You need to think about what's best for him, for you, and for his future. And I will be with you whenever you need. I thought a lot about this. During those 9 months, I went through a whirlwind of emotions, but it was with the help of my aunt that I made the decision to give my son the chance to have a life full of love and care. I knew that adoption was the best path, despite the pain it caused me. It was a pain that came from love, a love that I didn't know how to give, but that I knew I could offer by allowing him to have the chance to grow in a home where he would be cherished. When my son was born, I looked at him with so much love and so much fear at the same time. I knew he deserved more than I could offer, and with the help of my aunt, we did everything in the most careful way possible. We found a wonderful family that was willing to give him all the love in the world. I was 22 years old when I made this decision, and although it was difficult, I knew I had done the best for my son, and for me too. Aunt Vivian's love, her help, and unconditional support gave me strength to move forward. After making the difficult decision to place my son for adoption, something inside me changed. I knew I needed a fresh start. The convent, with its heavy memories and the judging looks from my mother, were no longer a place where I could live. I needed a new beginning, a place where I could heal and perhaps find peace. That's when Aunt Vivian, realizing how determined I was to start over, helped me. Together, we managed to gather a little money. She gave me the necessary support so that I could leave where I was, leave behind the memories and the pain, and move on to a place where I could rebuild my life. I always dreamed of living in Pinewood Valley, a small and peaceful town far from the bustle of where I was. I imagined that there, things could be different, that I could be who I really was without the weight of the past crushing me. When I arrived in Pinewood Valley, everything seemed new and full of possibilities. The streets were calmer, the simple houses more colorful, with gardens in front, flowers everywhere. It was the kind of place I always wanted to live. I knew it would be difficult at first, but that place seemed to give me the peace I had been searching for. I didn't tell my mother about my decision to leave. I knew she wouldn't understand. She was so disappointed in me, and I didn't want to cause more problems. I decided that before telling her anything, I would first need to establish myself and find my own path. I no longer wanted to live under her judging eyes. I rented a simple little house that had a small porch and a garden in front. Upon entering that house, I felt a sense of relief. It was small, but it was mine. It was my refuge, the place where I could begin to heal. I was alone, but at the same time, I felt that I had control over my life, that I could shape the future in a way I never thought would be possible. In the first days, I spent the time cleaning the house, organizing things, putting my life in order. The peace I felt in that small town was like a balm for my soul. I knew there was still a lot of pain inside me, but with time, I believed everything would be okay. For weeks, I kept myself busy. I worked in small jobs, made new friends, and began to feel part of the Pinewood Valley community. Gradually, I overcame the fear of being judged and learned to accept myself. I knew I couldn't erase what had happened, but I also knew I could build something new, something that was just mine. Finally, after feeling stronger and ready to face the past, I decided it was time to tell my mother what I had done. I was at peace with my decision, and now wanted her to know, but that would be for later. For now, I was starting a new life. I was alone, but stronger than before. The first days in Pinewood Valley were lonely, but also peaceful. I was beginning to get used to the simple routine of my new life. Work on small daily tasks, organizing the house, and walks around the neighborhood were already helping me feel more at peace. But as always happens when we least expect it, something new appeared in my life. It was on a sunny morning when I was walking around the neighborhood to get to know the place better. That's when I met him, Franklin. He was sitting on the porch of a simple house with a sweaty shirt and attentive eyes, observing the movement of the neighborhood. I, who was walking down the street, noticed that he was looking at me, but I didn't pay much attention. It was a new neighborhood for me, and I still didn't know all the faces. It was then that on an impulse, he got up and came to me. His smile was gentle and curious, as if he had noticed that I was new in town. "Hi, I'm Franklin," he said with a friendly smile. "Never seen you around here before. Are you new to the neighborhood?" I, a bit surprised by the approach, smiled timidly and replied, "Yes, that's me. I arrived a short time ago. I came to try to restart my life here." Franklin seemed really interested, and soon we began to talk about my move to Pinewood Valley. He explained that his mother owned a small apple orchard on the outskirts of town, and that he was always around helping. He spoke with such affection about the work in the orchard, and how the simple life of the countryside made him feel at peace. The conversation flowed, and I began to feel comfortable. He seemed to be someone really good, with positive energy and a willingness to help. It was then that he made me a proposal that would change my life. "If you need work, I can help you. My mother always needs someone to help in the orchard, especially during harvest time. You wouldn't need to leave here, and you could start earning money to support yourself." I was surprised, but at the same time relieved. Working in the orchard was something I had never considered, but I was willing to try anything to start paying rent and establish myself for good. I accepted the offer immediately, and with that I began to work with Franklin in his mother's apple orchard. The work was hard, but it gave me the feeling of doing something useful, something that made me feel part of something bigger, and time passed more quickly than I imagined. During the work, we got to know each other better. Franklin was a simple person, but full of dreams and with a generous heart. He always worried about others and had a calm way of seeing life. He always helped me whenever he could, explaining everything about apple cultivation, about how the harvest was done, and even teaching me about the plants and the land. That's when I realized that with time, I was beginning to fall in love with him. The days passed, and the work in the orchard became increasingly lighter. Franklin and I became closer, sharing laughs and stories. It was then that after a few months, he made me a proposal that caught me by surprise, but also gave me an enormous sense of security and happiness. Elaine, I wanted to ask you something. I know you're rebuilding and starting your life here, but I wanted you to consider the idea of living with me. My house is small, but it would be good to have you here. You wouldn't have to worry about rent anymore, and you could rest a bit. I looked at him, surprised but also moved by the kindness and affection he showed. It was an offer that gave me security, but also left me with a feeling of confidence that I had never felt before. I knew I was ready to start a new phase of my life with him by my side. And that's how my life began to change. Franklin and I moved in together to his house, where we began to build a simple life, but full of love and respect. I continued to help in the orchard, and each day our relationship strengthened. I felt that I had finally found a place where I belonged, where my heart was at peace. After moving to Pinewood Valley and starting a new life with Franklin, many things happened so quickly that for some time, I didn't know how to deal with everything that was changing inside me. I was involved in the work at the orchard, adapting to the new routine, and beginning to live alongside Franklin. But deep down, there was a longing that tightened my chest. It was the longing for Hazel, my friend, who had been by my side in the most difficult moments of my life. In the first days in Pinewood Valley, I tried to contact her. I felt I needed to talk to Hazel, needed to know how she was after everything that had happened at the convent. I sent some letters, writing about my new life and asking how she was. But the days passed, and the answers never came. With each letter I sent, a part of me despaired, as if something were wrong. I didn't know if Hazel had distanced herself, or if she simply didn't know what to write back. I knew that the last time we saw each other, the situation was so complicated that perhaps she was busy with her own life, or even without knowing what to say to me. I wanted so much to know about her, to know if she was okay, if she still thought of me, but the letters never came back. The weeks passed, and my life kept moving forward. Things began to settle with Franklin, and the work at the orchard kept me very busy. But deep down, I felt that Hazel was still present in my thoughts. Her friendship was one of the few good things I managed to have at the convent, and the idea that she could be somewhere distant without my answers made me sad. With time, I realized that perhaps there was nothing more I could do. I didn't know how her life was anymore, and I didn't know if she still remembered me in the same way. The letters became rarer, and eventually I stopped writing. I convinced myself that she might have found her own path, just as I was finding mine. And although the longing was still there, I knew that life had led me to a new direction. Time passed, and even with my heart tight for not knowing what happened to Hazel, I began to focus on my new life. I knew she would always be part of who I am, but I also knew that sometimes people follow different paths, and what happens in the past can no longer hold us back. The months passed, and life in Pinewood Valley with Franklin stabilized. I was beginning to find a balance between work, home, and the relationship. But there was something that still deeply bothered me. My mother. I knew that after so much time, she still didn't know the complete truth about what happened to me at the convent. I had sent some letters trying to explain what had happened and how my life was now. But the longing for home and the desire to reconcile with her made me write whenever I could. I wanted her to know that I was okay, that I was happy, and that everything that had happened had taught me many lessons. It was when one day I received a letter from her. She said she had read my messages and that she felt a need to see me, to talk in person. She expressed regret for not having been by my side in the most difficult hours and asked to visit me. When I read those words, a mix of feelings took over me. I was nervous, but also felt a certain hope. Could our conversation bring some kind of healing for what we had lived through? When she arrived, I could see how time had left marks on her. She was older, her eyes tired, but still with the look of someone who cares. I received her with a timid hug, not knowing exactly how to begin. After all that time, words seemed to fail, but the silence was broken by her. "Elaine," she began with a trembling voice, "I don't even know how to apologize for everything you went through. I can't imagine what you faced at the convent, and I know I left you alone when you needed me the most." I looked at her, feeling the pain and regret in her words. She continued with tears in her eyes. "I just wanted what was best for you, my daughter. I wanted you to have an education, a better life. I never imagined that all that would hurt you in this way. I was wrong, Elaine. I was wrong to send you to that place, to realize what was happening to you. I never wanted you to go through everything you went through." I remained silent for a moment, processing her words. What she was saying was difficult to hear, but at the same time, I knew it was the first step for our reconciliation. My mother had put me in a place that, even with good intentions, ended up causing me so much pain. But at the same time, she was here now, trying to understand what happened, trying to correct her mistakes. "Mom, it wasn't easy for me," I began, my voice a little stronger. "But I understood that as much as you were wrong, the intention was good. I know you wanted to protect me, but at that convent, it wasn't just the discipline I had to face. It was much more than that. But somehow I grew from all this. I learned to be stronger, to not let anyone define me." She looked at me, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. She didn't expect to hear this from me. She didn't know that despite everything, I was still willing to move forward, to rebuild myself. I had the right to be hurt, but at the same time, I knew that forgiveness could free me. "I'm so sorry, Elaine. Truly, I'll never leave you alone again. I'll be by your side always for whatever you need," she said, hugging me tightly. It was at this moment that I realized reconciliation was possible, and that despite everything that had happened, we could still support each other. My mother, with her apology and the promise to be by my side, gave me a feeling of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from me. I no longer felt so much anger, just a longing for what could have been different. We talked for hours, remembering the past, and trying to understand how each of us could move forward. The conversation didn't resolve everything, but it was an important step to heal the wounds. I knew that with time, things would improve between us, and that I could trust her again, now that she was willing to truly understand me. After all the challenges I faced, a new chapter was about to begin. I was no longer the same person who had left the convent with fear and insecurity. With time and with the help of Franklin, Aunt Vivian, and the reconciliation with my mother, I had found strength I didn't know I had. But looking to the future, something told me that life still had more to offer. One day, while walking through the Pinewood Valley neighborhood, I saw a small community center that was being built. It had a sign that said, Valley Women's Resource Center. That place immediately caught my attention. I knew how much support and help could have made a difference for me in those difficult times. And I soon realized that that center would be a great place for me to start making a difference in the lives of other women. Curiosity led me there, and I decided to enter. When I entered, I was received by a friendly lady who introduced herself as the coordinator of the center. "Hello, are you looking for something specific?" she asked me with a warm smile. I explained that I was interested in knowing more about their work, and she invited me for a conversation. We talked for hours about what the center did, and how it helped women in difficult situations, offering psychological support, training classes, and even legal support for those who needed it. When I finished listening, I felt a spark of something inside me. I knew I had the necessary experience to help other women. And more than that, I knew this was what I should do. I no longer wanted to live in the past. I wanted to use what I had learned to make a difference in the lives of other people. The coordinator offered me a job as an assistant at the center, helping to organize activities, and soon I was invited to give lectures on overcoming, share my story, and offer support for those who were going through difficulties similar to those I had lived through. Working with women who needed support was something that made my heart beat faster. Time passed, and I found myself increasingly involved in the work of the center. Each woman I helped, each story I heard, made me realize how life could be transformed by the courage to start over. I was finally living what I had always dreamed of. A life full of purpose, helping other people overcome their own challenges. Franklin was by my side, always supporting me, and our life together became more solid each day. He respected my work and saw how happy I was. My mother, with time, also began to get more involved in my life, offering me the support I always needed. The reconciliation with her brought immense peace, and now the pain of the past was just a distant memory. It was with this that I found my true path. I knew that life would never be perfect, but I was finally at peace with my story. I was no longer ashamed of what I had lived through. The healing didn't happen overnight. There were still nights when I woke up in cold sweats, the memories of the convent vivid in my mind. But with each woman I helped, each story of survival I witnessed, my own wounds began to close. Franklin would hold me on those difficult nights, never pushing me to talk, just being present. Slowly, I learned that my past didn't define me. It was merely the forge that had shaped me into the woman I had become. And that woman was stronger than I had ever imagined possible. On the contrary, I used my experience as a tool to help other women to rise, to believe in themselves, and to overcome adversities. Thank you all for listening to my story. As I look back on my journey, from the girl sent to the Sacred Heart convent, through deep sorrow, to the woman I am today, I realize how life is truly miraculous in its own way. I want to leave you with this. Never let pain define who you are. My wounds have become my strength. My tears have turned into motivation. And my scars have given me the ability to empathize with others. Life may throw us into what seem like impossible situations, but it's in our darkest moments that the light within us shines the brightest. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the founder of the Grandparent's Memories channel for inviting me to share my story. Thanks to this safe and welcoming space, the memories of our generation, the grandparents, can become meaningful lessons for those who come after us. If my story has touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the Grandparents Memories channel and liking this video. Your support will help more people hear stories like mine. Stories of resilience, hope, and the strength of the human spirit. I look forward to meeting you again in future sharings. Please stay tuned and follow the channel so you don't miss stories from people like us. Those who have lived, loved, suffered, and risen again. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening.